Nobody in downtown Atlanta's Buckhead district expected silence to fall the way it did. One second, the cafe buzzed with espresso machines, brunch chatter, and clinking glassware. The next, a scream. Not loud at first, sharp, uncontrolled, like pain ripping straight out of the body. Scalding coffee exploded across a waitress's chest. Her tray hit the marble floor, cups shattered. She collapsed to her knees, skin already blistering red and raw. And standing over her, phone raised, laughing, was her ex-boyfriend. Not laughing nervously, not laughing awkwardly, laughing like this was entertainment. But what he didn't see, what nobody in that cafe saw, was the man sitting in the far corner booth, a Korean man, perfectly still, fingers resting on a porcelain teacup. At his feet, a massive black Jindo canine rose slowly to standing position, silent, focused, alert. Most people in Atlanta knew that man as a quiet investor. What they didn't know was that every Korean organization on the East Coast answered to him. And 3 years ago, that waitress's name had appeared on a sealed file he ordered buried. Not erased, buried. Today, that file was about to open, and the man standing over her with the camera had no idea that every door he had ever hidden behind was about to close. If you leave now, you miss the moment his whole world collapses. Subscribe to Tales by Wave. This is just the first 60 seconds. It started with a tray. Naomi Carter, 27 years old, 6 hours into her shift at Lennox Grind, a high-end cafe in Buckhead's most expensive strip. Braids pulled tight, uniform pressed clean, 8 months on the job, never late, never a complaint. 2 lattes and a cortado, table 9. She turned and froze. Darren Whitlock sat at the counter, legs crossed, phone in hand, smiling at her like she owed him something. Her ex, the man who told her 3 years ago, "If you ever ruin my image, I will ruin your life." Her hands trembled. "Still serving coffee," he said loudly. "After everything I gave you, this is what you chose?" Naomi kept walking, jaw tight. She set the tray down at table 9, turned to walk back. Darren stood, crossed the floor in 3 steps, grabbed the next loaded tray from the service counter, and swung. Hot coffee exploded across her chest and arms. The scream came before the pain registered. Skin blistered instantly. Cups shattered on marble. Patrons jumped back. Naomi collapsed to her knees, tears streaming, burns swelling red and raw. Darren stood over her, phone raised, recording. "Guess karma finally spilled on you." Nobody moved. His family owned half the real estate on that block. His father sat on city council. His last name meant consequences for other people. Naomi tried to stand. Her legs gave out. She wanted to scream that she left because he controlled her, because he once grabbed her wrist so hard it bruised for weeks, because he told her weakness was why he cheated. But pain stole her voice, and Darren enjoyed every second. In the far corner, Kang Min-jae had not flinched. His dog, a black Jindo, 90 pounds of silence, rose to its feet, eyes locked on Darren. Min-jae set his teacup down. "Turn off your phone." Darren spun around. The voice was calm, but it cut through the cafe harder than the scream had. He saw the man, then the dog. His body sensed danger before his brain could name it. "You talking to me?" Min-jae stood, slow, controlled, final. "Call an ambulance, now." Darren laughed. "For her? She's dramatic." Min-jae looked at Naomi, shaking on the floor, fighting tears, refusing to beg. He looked back at Darren. "You don't remember me, but you remember the woman you reported to the police 3 years ago." The cafe went cold. "You said she stole from you, said she was unstable." Min-jae's voice never rose. "That report cost her a scholarship, and her mother, her job." Naomi looked up. She hadn't known anyone else knew. Darren's face drained white. "Who are you?" Min-jae smiled, the kind that never reaches the eyes. "Someone who cleans up messes, quietly." Darren stepped back. His heel brushed the dog's paw. The Jindo didn't growl, just locked eyes. Predators don't announce themselves. Min-jae placed a black card on the counter. Her medical bills, her missed wages, and the security footage, all of it. Darren's phone buzzed. Then again, his lawyer, his father, a contact labeled City Council Private going silent. Something had already been set in motion, and Darren Whitlock, still standing in a cafe he thought he owned, had no idea that this wasn't the confrontation. This was the warning. Paramedics arrived 9 minutes later. Naomi was lifted on a stretcher, arms wrapped in cool gauze, chest still burning. She stared at the ceiling as they wheeled her out, past the shattered cups, past the customers who watched and did nothing. She didn't cry, not because the pain stopped, because she'd trained herself years ago. If you cry, he wins. Darren was already outside, cuffed, phone taken. His face looked like a man who felt the ground shift, but didn't yet understand how far he was about to fall. Naomi didn't look at him, but she felt someone walking beside the stretcher. Min-jae, his dog, moved in silence at his side. He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, just walked. At the ambulance doors, he spoke. "You don't owe me anything, but your past isn't as buried as you think." She frowned through the pain. What does that mean? He didn't answer. Instead, he placed a black card in her hand. No company name, just a phone number embossed in silver. "No matter who calls you, you call me first." She wanted to ask why. Why him? Why now? Why a stranger knew things she had never spoken out loud? But he was already turning away. The dog followed, shadow and protector both. The ambulance doors closed, and Naomi held the card like it might burn her worse than the coffee did. 3 years ago, Naomi Carter had been a different person. She was 24, studying forensic accounting at Georgia State on a full scholarship, top of her class, sharp enough to read a balance sheet the way most people read a menu, fast and hungry for what didn't add up. She met Darren Whitlock at a campus fundraiser. He was charming, wealthy, generous with attention. She fell hard. It took 6 months for the rot to rot. He monitored her phone, controlled her schedule, told her what to wear and who to speak to. When she tried to leave, he filed a police report claiming she stole jewelry from his apartment. She hadn't, but his family had lawyers. Naomi had a public defender. The scholarship disappeared in a week. Her record flagged. Job offers pulled back. Her mother, who cleaned offices in a Whitlock-owned building, was let go the same month. Naomi's life collapsed in 60 days. She rebuilt alone. Night classes, double shifts, surviving, not living. Now she lay on a hospital bed, arms bandaged, IV drip feeding something cool into her veins. A nurse set paperwork on the side table. "Good news," the nurse said gently. "Your treatment, your follow-ups, and any wages you missed during recovery, all covered." Naomi blinked. By who? No name on file, just a card number. Naomi's stomach tightened. She reached for the black card still sitting on the bed beside her, turned it over slowly. On the back, handwritten in dark ink, 5 words. The report wasn't the only thing he buried. Her hands started shaking, not from pain, from fear, because she had never told anyone what Darren took from her 3 years ago. Not the jewelry lie, not the scholarship. Something else, something deeper, something she buried inside herself and swore would stay hidden. So how did a stranger already know? 40 miles south of Atlanta, past the billboards and the pine trees, sat a logistics office at the edge of the Savannah port. Clean glass, steel framing, Kang Maritime Holdings, import and export. On the surface, it moved cargo, electronics from Busan, textiles from Incheon, auto parts bound for dealerships across the southeast. Beneath the surface, it moved power. Every Korean organization on the East Coast reported through this building, not loudly, Not on paper, but everyone who mattered knew. Nothing moved without Kang Min-jae's permission. Min-jae sat behind his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled once. The Jindo lay at his feet, ears flat, resting but aware. Across from him stood Seo Jun-ho, his lieutenant for 11 years, loyal, precise, and right now, furious. "You intervened in a public cafe," Jun-ho said, "in front of cameras, witnesses, police." Min-jae said nothing. "You never expose yourself, not for anyone." Jun-ho's voice tightened. "So why her?" Min-jae opened a drawer, pulled out a sealed file, brown envelope, thick, a name written across the front in black marker. Naomi Carter. He placed it on the desk. 3 years ago, Min-jae said, this woman was a forensic accounting student at Georgia State. One of her class projects involved analyzing public housing contracts in Fulton County. Jun-hung crossed his arms. She found inconsistencies, overpayments, shell invoices, tax records that didn't match filings. She didn't understand what she'd found. She thought it was a grading exercise. He opened the envelope, spread the documents across the desk. Pages of contracts, financial statements, government bids with inflated numbers. The Whitlock family has been overbilling city housing projects for 12 years. Millions in fraudulent contracts. Public money funneled through their real estate into offshore accounts. Jun-ho leaned forward. His anger shifted into focus. "And Naomi's research flagged it?" Min-jae nodded. "A professor flagged her paper. It should have triggered an audit." Min-jae paused. "But Darren found out first." "The police report?" Jun-ho said. Min-jae nodded. "He filed it to discredit her, made her look like a thief, unstable, vindictive. Her paper was dismissed, her professor backed down. The audit never happened." Silence filled the office. "And you had this file for 3 years?" Jun-ho said slowly. "Why didn't you use it?" Min-jae met his eyes. "Because the Whitlocks were useful. Their port contracts moved our freight through customs without inspection. Exposing them too early would have shut down our corridor along the coast." The truth hung in the air like smoke. Min-jae hadn't buried the file to protect Naomi. He buried it to protect himself. He had the proof that would have saved her life 3 years ago, and he kept it locked in a drawer. Still think he's the hero? Subscribe now, because what he does next will make you question everything. "And now?" asked Jun-ho. "Now, the Whitlocks are trying to renegotiate our shipping terms. They want 60% of the corridor. That's $200 million in annual freight revenue." Min-jae closed the file. "If the Whitlock empire collapses, we control the corridor outright. No partners, no split." Jun-ho stared at him. "So the girl is just a tool." The room went quiet. Min-jae didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened, his fingers pressed flat against the desk. The Jindo lifted its head, ears forward, watching its master the way it watched threats, carefully, like it sensed something shifting beneath the surface. 5 seconds passed. "Get her a lawyer," Min-jae said, "the best one." He paused. "And make sure Darren Whitlock doesn't sleep tonight." Jun-ho studied him for a long moment, then nodded once and walked out. Min-jae sat alone. The dog settled back down at his feet. He looked at the file, at her name, and for a reason he refused to examine, he didn't put it back in the drawer. Naomi called the number 3 days later, not because she trusted him, because the burns kept her awake, and so did the 5 words on the back of that card. The report wasn't the only thing he buried. She needed to know what that meant. The phone rang once. Min-jae answered like he had been waiting. "Tomorrow, I'll come to you." He didn't ask for her address. Her apartment was small, 1 bedroom off a narrow hallway in East Atlanta, clean but sparse, a second-hand couch, a folding table for meals and studying, 1 framed photo, her and her mother 10 years ago, before everything collapsed. She sat on that couch, bandaged arms, jaw set, jeans, long sleeves to cover the gauze. She was in pain, but she was standing. A knock at exactly 3 p.m. Min-jae stood in the hallway, dark jacket, no entourage, just the dog. The Jindo stepped inside first, circled the living room once, then sat near the window like it had always lived there. Min-jae sat at the kitchen table without asking. Naomi stayed standing, arms folded. Talk. Darren's family is built on fraud, government housing contracts, overbilled for 12 years, millions stolen from public funds. He let that land. 3 years ago, you found the first thread, a forensic accounting project. You flagged numbers that didn't add up. Naomi's lips parted. She hadn't thought about that paper in years. You didn't know what you'd found, but Darren did. That's why he filed the report. That's why your scholarship disappeared. That's why your mother lost her job. Naomi's hands curled into fists, not from fear, something hotter. He didn't destroy you because you left him, Min-jae said. He destroyed you because you were the only person who could prove his family was stealing. She sat down, not because her legs failed, because 3 years of lies pressed down at once. 3 years believing she'd been punished for walking away. The truth was, she'd been punished for being right. Her voice came out steady. You didn't save me out of kindness. Min-jae held her gaze. You need something, so say it. Your research, your testimony, a courtroom with charges. And what do I get? Your scholarship restored, your mother's name cleared, and Darren Whitlock sitting across from a judge instead of standing over you with a camera. She almost said yes, then stopped. What's in it for you? He didn't answer. The Jindo rose from the window, crossed the room, sat at Naomi's feet. Min-jae stared at the dog, his expression shifted for the first time. Not surprise, recognition, like watching something he'd known would happen, but hoped wouldn't. That dog had never chosen anyone. Naomi broke the silence. I'll help you, but I want full access to that file, every page. If you're hiding anything, I walk. Min-jae nodded, agreed. He stood and walked to the door. The dog didn't follow. It stayed at Naomi's feet. He looked back once, at the dog, then at her. Then he left. In the hallway, he pulled out his phone. One text to Junho. Keep pages 14 through 18 sealed. She's not ready for that yet. He pocketed the phone and walked toward the stairwell. The question nobody was asking, the one that would burn everything down, was simple. What was on those 4 pages? And why was the man who promised her the truth already breaking that promise? Darren Whitlock made bail in 48 hours. His father's lawyers filed a motion before the ink on the arrest report dried. Assault reduced to a misdemeanor, bail posted. Conditions: no contact with the victim. But Darren didn't need contact to destroy someone. He had done it before. He started with a private investigator. Find out who the man at the cafe was, he told him. Korean, 40s, had a dog, paid her bills. The investigator came back 3 days later, placed a single sheet of paper on the desk. Blank. There's nothing? Darren asked. Less than nothing. No social media, no press, no public records that lead anywhere real. His companies exist, but every layer leads to another shell. He paused. People like that, the ones you can't find, are the ones you don't go looking for. Darren fired him the same afternoon. Then he did what his family had always done. He picked up the phone and called in favors. Within a week, Naomi's life started collapsing. Again. The cafe let her go. Budget cuts, but her manager wouldn't make eye contact. Her landlord called. Building being sold, 30 days. Her bank account flagged for suspicious activity. Funds frozen, no explanation. The same playbook, 3 years later, like clockwork. Naomi sat in her apartment, the one she was about to lose, and stared at the wall. The bandages on her arms were thinner now, the burns healing, but everything around her was falling apart again. She picked up the black card. This time, she didn't hesitate. He's doing it again, she said when Min-jae answered. Her voice was flat, not broken, controlled. You said you'd protect me. Prove it. Min-jae proved it. Within 72 hours, Naomi had a new apartment in a secured building inside Min-jae's territory, a position at one of his companies, forensic accounting, legitimate work, real salary, and a legal team preparing her civil and criminal case against the Whitlock family. She didn't thank him. He didn't expect her to. What he did was open the file. Most of it. They sat across from each other on a long table in his office, documents spread out like a map of 12 years of fraud. Contracts with inflated numbers, shell invoices for construction that never happened, tax filings that didn't match a single receipt. And in the middle of the stack, her old research notes, the ones she wrote for a class project at Georgia State, the ones Darren claimed she fabricated, the ones her professor refused to stand behind. She picked them up. Her hands trembled. She had written these at 24, in a library at 2 a.m., highlighter in one hand, cold coffee in the other, believing she was doing something that mattered. And she had been right. Tears fell. Not from sadness, from something heavier. Validation. 3 years of being called a liar, unstable, dramatic, dangerous, and here, in black ink, in her own handwriting, was proof she had been telling the truth the entire time. She spent 3 years carrying the weight of a lie someone else told about her, 3 years doubting herself. If you've ever been made to feel crazy for speaking the truth, this moment is for you. Subscribe. Share this, because her fight isn't over. Min-jae gave her space, didn't speak, didn't reach for her. When she was ready, she wiped her eyes and kept reading. That's when she saw it. Page 9. A recurring quarterly payment from Whitlock Holdings to an offshore entity registered in the Cayman Islands. She traced the routing number through 2 shell companies. It didn't lead to the Whitlocks. It led to a company called KMJ Pacific Limited. Naomi stared at the letters. KMJ. Kong Min-jae. She looked up from the page. He was watching her, still, quiet, the way he had watched Darren in the cafe. And for the first time since she met him, Naomi felt the same chill Darren must have felt. Her protector wasn't just fighting the Whitlocks. He had once been in business with them. Naomi didn't wait until morning. She stood from the table, picked up the page, held it in front of Min-jae's face like a mirror. KMJ Pacific Limited. Your initials, your company, receiving quarterly payments from the same family you're asking me to destroy. Min-jae didn't blink. Explain this, now. He leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and for the first time, he didn't deflect. 5 years ago, my organization used Whitlock Holdings to move port revenue through their real estate, laundered through property sales, clean on paper, invisible to auditors. Naomi's jaw tightened. You laundered money through them? Yes. No apology, no softening. It was business, he continued, until Darren's father wanted more. 60% of the corridor, threatened to report our freight to federal customs if we refused. So you built the file, not for justice, for leverage. Min-jae held her gaze. Yes. The documents on the table looked different now, not evidence of the Whitlocks' crimes, but a war between 2 powerful men, and Naomi was standing in the middle of it. You had this 3 years ago, she said, voice low, hands shaking. When my scholarship was lost, when my mother lost her job, you could have stopped it all. Min-jae said nothing. You chose not to, because exposing them would have exposed you. Silence, the kind that answers questions louder than words. Naomi set the page down on the table, pressed her palm flat against it. I'm not your weapon, I'm not his victim, and I'm not a file you bury when the timing doesn't suit you. Junho stood in the doorway, arms folded. He had never heard anyone speak to Min-jae like this. Nobody spoke to Min-jae. If you want my cooperation, we do this my way, in a courtroom with real charges, on the record. No backroom deals, no laundered favors. Min-jae studied her. 10 seconds. 20. The Jindo, still at Naomi's side since the apartment, pressed its body against her leg. Min-jae looked at the dog, then at her. He agreed. Naomi turned and walked toward the door. Junho stepped aside without a word. The others parted. She didn't look back. The moment she was gone, Junho closed the door and faced Min-jae. "If this goes to a courtroom," he said, "our laundering history surfaces too. Every transaction, every shell account. You understand that?" Min-jae stood, walked to the window. The Savannah port stretched out below. Cranes, containers, and cargo ships lined along the water like sleeping giants. Everything he had built sat on the other side of that glass. "Then we clean our side first," he said. "All of it. Before she finds pages 14 through 18. Junho's face went pale. "Those pages aren't about the Whitlocks." "No," Min-jae said quietly. "They're not. They're about you, what you did, what you allowed to happen to her." Junho's voice dropped. "If she sees those pages, it's not just the case, it's everything. She'll walk, and she'll burn us on the way out." Min-jae pressed his fingers against the glass. "I know," he said. Below, a cargo ship pulled away from the dock, slow and heavy. The kind of movement that looks calm from a distance, but carries enough force to crush anything in its path. Min-jae watched it leave, and the question sitting in that room, heavier than any file, any contract, any confession, was whether a man who let someone suffer for 3 years could ever clean enough of himself to deserve her trust. The legal team filed preliminary charges on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, every news outlet in Atlanta had the story. Whitlock Holdings accused of 12 years of government contract fraud, millions in public housing funds, shell invoices, falsified records. Congressman Whitlock called the allegations baseless attacks, promised cooperation. Behind closed doors, he made phone calls that had nothing to do with cooperation. Darren found out from his father. The call lasted 4 minutes. His father spoke in a voice Darren had only heard once, the night their family accountant disappeared in 2019. "Fix this, whatever it takes." Darren started with Naomi. He showed up at her new building Thursday evening. Security stopped him, Min-jae's territory. He couldn't get past the front desk, so he leaned into the intercom. "You think a Korean gangster is going to save you? When I'm done, they'll find you both." Naomi stood in her apartment, hands flat on the counter, the Jindo beside her, ears raised, body tense. She didn't respond. That night, someone broke into Naomi's office at Min-jae's company. Lock picked clean, no alarms, no cameras disrupted. Professional, surgical. Her backup copies of the financial evidence, gone. Every printed page, every annotated document. The hard drive from her desk, removed. Naomi called Min-jae at 6 a.m. "It's gone," she said. "All of it." Silence on the line, then, "Come to the port now." She arrived within an hour. Min-jae was in the conference room with Junho and the legal team. The energy was different, tight, like air before a storm. The Whitlocks hired outside contractors, private security firm, the kind governments use when they need something to vanish. Naomi looked at Min-jae. Or it was someone inside your organization, testing whether I'm becoming a liability. The room went still. Min-jae met her eyes, didn't flinch. "If I wanted you gone, you'd already be gone. I don't test people, I decide." The words were cold, but she believed him. Her evidence is stolen, her ex just threatened her life, and the man protecting her has secrets that could put him in prison. If you walk away now, you'll never know who really broke into that office. Subscribe. Stay. The legal team delivered worse news. Congressman Whitlock was preparing a federal referral, offering to expose Min-jae's laundering operations in exchange for full immunity for his own family's fraud, a deal with the Department of Justice. If the congressman talked first, Min-jae went down. Every shell company, every port transaction, every dollar that ever passed through KMJ Pacific. If Min-jae talked first, Naomi's case would be tainted. built on evidence gathered by a man with his own criminal history, defense attorneys would tear it apart. Both paths led to destruction. That evening, Min-jae found Naomi on the roof of his building. The city spread below, lights flickering through haze. The Jindo sat between them. He told her everything: the laundering, the sealed pages, what he had done, what he had allowed to happen to her. All of it. Naomi listened without interrupting. When he finished, her face was unreadable. "If I disappear tomorrow," Min-jae said, "the case still stands without me, but you need to be the one holding every document." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a sealed envelope. "Don't open this until I'm gone," he said. She grabbed his arm, the first time she had touched him. "Where are you going?" Min-jae looked at her hand on his sleeve, then at her face. Something crossed his expression, not the controlled calm she had seen before, something raw, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He didn't answer. The Jindo pressed against Naomi's leg, whined softly, and for the first time in the story, the most powerful man in the room looked like a man who had already made his choice, and it was going to cost him everything. Min-jae wore the wire on a Friday. The FBI field office in Midtown Atlanta had offered the deal 2 days earlier, full immunity in exchange for recorded conversations with Congressman Whitlock, confirming the fraud, the shell accounts, and 12 years of stolen public money. The catch: Min-jae had to admit to his own laundering on tape, every dollar, every route. Permanent, public. He signed the agreement at 9 a.m., alone, no lawyer present, no Junho, no one from his organization. Because the wire wasn't just going to capture the congressman, it was going to dismantle everything Min-jae had built. The meeting happened at a private club in Buckhead, the same neighborhood where Darren poured coffee on Naomi 6 weeks ago. The congressman arrived confident. He still believed he was the most powerful person in the room. He wasn't. Min-jae sat across from him, 2 glasses of water on the table, no food, no staff nearby. "You want 60% of the shipping corridor," Min-jae said calmly. "Let's talk about what that looks like." The congressman leaned forward, smiled, and for 43 minutes he talked about the shell invoices, about the housing contracts, about the payments routed through his son's accounts, about the false police report filed against a girl whose research almost brought the entire structure down. He laughed when he mentioned Naomi. "Some scholarship kid with a calculator," the congressman said. "My son handled it. One phone call to a campus officer and her credibility vanished, clean and quiet." Min-jae's jaw tightened. His hand pressed flat on his knee beneath the table. But he didn't move, didn't react. The wire captured every word. When the meeting ended, Min-jae walked to his car, sat in the driver's seat, pulled the wire from his chest, and dropped it into the agent's hand through the window. "It's done," he said. 3 miles away, Naomi sat on the floor of her apartment. The envelope was open. Pages 14 through 18 were spread across her lap. She had waited, tried to wait, but when midnight passed and Min-jae hadn't called, she opened it. The first page was a surveillance report dated 3 years ago, a private investigator hired by Min-jae's organization tracking Darren Whitlock's movements during the week a false police report was filed. Min-jae had known. The second page was a transcript of a phone call between Junho and Min-jae, 3 days after Naomi lost her scholarship. Junho had recommended intervening, clearing her name, exposing the false report. Min-jae's response was one line: "Not yet. The timing doesn't serve us." He had the power to save her 3 years ago. He heard Junho say her name. He chose the timing that served himself. And right now, he's wearing a wire to take down the same empire he once profited from. If you think you know whether he's the hero or the villain, you're wrong. Subscribe. This story isn't what you think it is. The third page was a financial memo showing that KMJ Pacific continued receiving quarterly payments from the Whitlocks for 11 months after Naomi's lice collapsed. He didn't just watch, he kept profiting. The fourth page was a handwritten note, Min-jae's handwriting. 4 words: I should have acted. No date, no context, just guilt sitting on paper. Naomi's hands trembled, not from fear, from a grief she couldn't name, because the man who gave her back her evidence, her apartment, her dignity, was the same man who could have prevented her from losing them in the first place. She picked up her phone, called him. He answered on the first ring, silent, waiting. You let him destroy me, Naomi said. Her voice was steady, her eyes were not. You watched for 3 years. You had proof, you had power, and you chose yourself. Silence. I'm testifying, she continued, but not because of you, despite you. She hung up, set the phone on the floor beside the pages, pressed her palms against her eyes. The Jindo crossed the room, laid its head in her lap, and for the first time since that cafe, Naomi cried. Not the kind of tears that come from pain, the kind that come from learning that the person who saved you is also the person who let you drown. Naomi drove to her mother's apartment that same night. Lorraine Parter opened the door and knew. One look at her daughter's face, and she knew. How long? Naomi asked. Lorraine sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap the same way the congressman had folded his in the courtroom, a habit learned from the people who paid her. Since the beginning, she whispered. Naomi didn't scream, didn't cry. She stood in the doorway and let the silence do the work. They said if I kept quiet, you'd be safe, that if I talked, they'd come after both of us. So you took their money. I took their money so we could eat, Naomi, her mother's voice cracked. You think I wanted this? You think watching my daughter fall apart for 3 years didn't kill me every single day? Naomi looked at the woman who raised her, loved her, lied to her. You could have told me, she said quietly, even once. Lorraine wiped her eyes. I was afraid. So was I, Mama, for 3 years, alone. Neither of them moved. The apartment was small. The distance between them felt like miles. Naomi turned toward the door, then stopped. I'm not here to punish you, she said. I'm here because you deserve to hear this from me, not from a courtroom. She left. The next morning, Naomi walked back into the federal courthouse. Same 16 steps, same marble hallway. But this time, she carried a new document, a motion to reclassify the Whitlock payments to Lorraine as witness intimidation, not hush money, not a gift, a federal crime. Her mother's testimony wouldn't be needed, but Darren's father had just lost his last shield. The verdict came down 11 days later. Congressman Whitlock, guilty on 14 counts: federal contract fraud, wire fraud, obstruction, witness tampering. Darren Whitlock, guilty on assault, filing a false police report, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Kang Min-jae, 2 years probation, full asset forfeiture of KMJ Pacific Limited, cooperation credit for the FBI wire recording that broke the case open. 3 men tried to control her future: a congressman, his son, and a man who buried proof that would have saved her. Today, one is in prison, one is convicted, and one gave up everything he built. Naomi stood in that courtroom with nothing but the truth. If her story doesn't make you subscribe, share, and come back for more, I don't know what will. 6 months passed. Naomi re-enrolled at Georgia State, forensic accounting, the same program she'd been forced out of 3 years earlier. The department chair who had signed her dismissal now signed her readmission with a letter of apology attached. She started a nonprofit in East Atlanta, a small office above a laundromat. The mission was simple: help women who lost careers, scholarships, or housing because someone with more power decided to erase them. She named it Second Ledger. One Tuesday afternoon, a knock came to the office door. Jun Ho stood in the hallway. Beside him, the Jindo. The dog crossed the threshold before Jun Ho could speak, walked straight to Naomi, sat at her feet. He asked me to bring him, he said. Said the dog chose you a long time ago. Naomi knelt down, pressed her forehead against the dog's fur, let herself breathe. That evening, she called Min-jae. He answered, but didn't speak first. "Thank you," she said. "Not for saving me, for telling the truth when it mattered." A pause, long enough to hold 3 years of silence. "It should have been sooner," he said. "Yes," Naomi replied. "It should have been." She hung up. 2 days later, a manila envelope arrived at Second Ledger. No return address. Inside, a file. A new name, a new woman, another case buried by someone with money and reach. Naomi opened it, read the first page, picked up her phone, and started again. Because Naomi didn't just survive her story, she became the reason someone else would survive theirs.